The moving trucks arrived at 9 a.m., a stark, undeniable punctuation mark on a life I'd spent 2 decades building. By 9:15, Thomas, my husband, stood barefoot in the driveway, still in yesterday's wrinkled dress shirt, staring blankly at the sold sign, planted firmly in front of the house we had called home for 23 years. His voice, usually so booming and confident, was a thin whisper as he kept asking the realtor if this was some kind of mistake. Our daughter, Chloe, was a whirlwind of frantic energy, screaming into her phone at someone from the title company. And there, sitting quietly on the kitchen counter, beside the untouched container of pasta they'd told me to eat the night before, was the letter I had left behind. I wasn't there to witness any of it. By then, I was already 6 hours away, driving north through the mountains, the windows cracked open, letting the cold October air fill my lungs for the first time in what felt like years. The strange thing was, I didn't feel guilty. I felt calm. The night before had begun like every other family celebration in our house, with me in the kitchen while everyone else prepared to be seen. The scent of roasted garlic and fresh basil still lingered in the air as I wiped down the counters for the second time. A pan of chicken parmesan sat cooling near the stove, while the dishwasher hummed softly behind me. Upstairs, I could hear Chloe moving quickly from room to room, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. My son Leo's voice drifted down the hallway as he argued with someone from work through his AirPods. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, Thomas walked through the front door, grinning like a man 20 years younger. "Eleanor," he called out before I even saw him. "Where are you?" "In the kitchen," I replied, my voice a little tired. He appeared moments later, loosening his tie with one hand while carrying a bottle of Dom Perignon, vintage 2008, in the other. His face was flushed with excitement. For a second, seeing him that happy warmed something inside me, the way it used to. "They finally did it," he said, his eyes sparkling. "Regional director, I got it." I blinked at him. "You got it?" "I got it." He laughed and shook his head. "God, it still doesn't feel real." I smiled, immediately, genuinely proud despite everything that had changed between us over the years. "Thomas, that's wonderful." He leaned down and kissed my cheek quickly before walking toward the refrigerator. "I knew tonight would happen eventually," he murmured, already pulling out a sparkling water. Chloe suddenly appeared in the doorway, wearing a fitted emerald green silk dress that probably cost more than my old monthly librarian salary. "Leo already booked the private room downtown," she said brightly. "Everybody's meeting us there at 7:30. "Everybody?" I asked automatically. There was a tiny pause. Not long, just enough. Chloe glanced toward Thomas before smoothing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Mostly the people from Thomas's company. My parents, Leo's mentor from the office. That sort of thing." Thomas nodded distractedly, already scrolling through his phone. "A lot of networking tonight." I waited for him to say, "Of course you're coming." For him to notice I was still standing there, holding the dish towel in my hands. Instead, he opened the fridge and frowned slightly. "Didn't we still have that lasagna from yesterday?" "It's in the glass container," I said, my voice flat. "Perfect." He shut the refrigerator door. "You can finish that tonight. No point wasting food." I stared at him, not because the comment was cruel. Exactly. Thomas had never been openly cruel. That would have been easier to fight against. No, what hurt was how natural it sounded to him. As if it made complete sense that his wife of 23 years would stay home alone eating leftovers while the rest of the family celebrated the biggest promotion of his life. Chloe smiled softly, the way people do when they're trying to smooth over something uncomfortable without actually fixing it. "Honestly, Mom, you'd probably hate this dinner anyway. It's all corporate talk." Leo finally came downstairs, adjusting his Rolex. "Dad, Mr. Henderson said the regional guys are already there." Then he looked at me quickly. "Mom, can you make sure nobody forgets to feed Daisy later?" Not one person asked if I wanted to come. I looked at Thomas one more time, giving him one final opportunity to see me. He didn't. He was too busy texting someone from work. So, I smiled. "Okay," I said quietly. That was it. One word. Chloe grabbed her purse. Leo opened the garage door. Thomas walked over and kissed my forehead absent-mindedly, like I was part of the furniture. "We probably won't be home until late," he said. "Don't wait up." A few minutes later, the house fell silent. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the distant sound of their car pulling away from the driveway. The dishwasher continued humming softly behind me. Somewhere upstairs, the television in Leo and Chloe's room was still playing because they'd forgotten to turn it off. I walked slowly toward the refrigerator and opened it. There, on the middle shelf, sat the container of lasagna. A yellow sticky note had been attached to the lid in Chloe's neat handwriting. Eleanor. For some reason, that tiny heart nearly broke me. I closed the refrigerator door carefully and leaned both hands against the counter. The truth was, this hadn't happened overnight. People don't wake up one morning suddenly invisible inside their own family. It happens slowly, quietly, one small dismissal at a time. A dinner you're excluded from here, a conversation that happens without you there, a decision made for you instead of with you. Over the last 2 years, I had become useful instead of loved, reliable instead of cherished. Thomas used to ask how my day was the second he walked through the door. Now, he mostly asked where things were, his dry cleaning, his charger, the blue folder from his office. Leo and Chloe had moved into our home 11 months earlier, temporarily, while saving for a house. At first, I'd been happy about it. I missed having a full house after our youngest, Sarah, left for college in Boston. But gradually, the entire rhythm of the home changed. Chloe reorganized the kitchen within 3 weeks. Then came new schedules, new furniture, new systems for how the house should run. Without anyone ever saying it directly, I somehow became the unpaid staff member, keeping everybody comfortable. And the worst part, I had let it happen. I stayed quiet, because peace seemed easier than conflict. Until that night. Until the leftovers. I walked upstairs slowly, and entered the bedroom Thomas and I had shared for over 2 decades. His side of the bed was unmade from that morning. A charcoal suit jacket lay draped across the chair near the window. For a long moment, I just stood there, looking around the room. Then I opened the closet. In the back corner, beneath an old storage shelf, sat 2 navy blue suitcases we hadn't used in years. I pulled them out carefully and placed them on the bed. And for the first time in a very long time, I stopped thinking about what was best for everyone else. I didn't pack everything. That was the first thing I realized as I folded sweaters into the larger suitcase beneath the soft yellow light of our bedroom lamp. I wasn't trying to erase my life. I was trying to save whatever parts of it still belonged to me. Outside the bedroom window, the neighborhood looked peaceful. Porch lights glowed warmly across the street. Somewhere nearby, someone's sprinkler clicked rhythmically against dry autumn grass. It felt strange, knowing the world continued normally while something inside me had shifted so completely. I moved quietly through the room, pulling clothes from drawers with calm, deliberate motions. Jeans, warm sweaters, my mother's silver jewelry box from the top shelf of the closet, the framed photograph of Sarah and me on her graduation day. Each item a small piece of myself I was reclaiming. Downstairs, I wrote a letter. Not a long one, just a few sentences. I placed it on the kitchen counter, right next to the untouched lasagna. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to leave. I grabbed my car keys, my purse, and a small overnight bag I'd packed with essentials. The house was silent, waiting. I paused at the front door, taking one last look at the home that had once been filled with so much laughter and love. Now it felt like a museum of a life I no longer recognized. Then I stepped out into the cool night air, closed the door softly behind me, and drove away. The drive north was long, but surprisingly peaceful. I called Sarah from a rest stop somewhere in Pennsylvania, her voice a welcome anchor in the quiet vastness of my new reality. She was surprised, of course, but not shocked. "Mom," she said, her voice gentle, "I always knew you deserved more." Those words, simple as they were, brought a lump to my throat. She understood. She truly understood. I arrived in Vermont just as the sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. My cousin, Martha, had offered me her small cottage by Lake Champlain. It was rustic, cozy, and completely mine for as long as I needed it. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and breathed. For the first time in years, I felt like I could truly breathe. The next morning, my phone began to ring. First Chloe, then Leo, then Thomas. I let them all go to voicemail. I knew what they would say: confusion, anger, betrayal. They wouldn't understand. How could they? They hadn't been living my life. They hadn't been the ones slowly fading into the background, becoming a ghost in their own home. By noon, I finally listened to Thomas's newest voicemail. "Eleanor," he said hoarsely, "please stop doing this. If you're angry, fine. We'll talk when you come home. But selling the house, Jesus Christ. Eleanor." I sat quietly by the window while he kept talking. "I know things haven't been perfect lately, but this," he exhaled sharply. "Leo and Chloe have nowhere to go right now. The movers are literally here, carrying furniture outside." For a brief second, guilt pressed against my ribs. Then another memory surfaced immediately. Me standing alone in the kitchen, while they all left for dinner without me. Not because they forgot, but because nobody considered me important enough to include. The guilt faded. I deleted the voicemail. Outside, rain drifted softly across the lake in silver streaks. Martha's porch light glowed through the mist next door, while somewhere farther down the road, a dog barked twice before falling quiet again. The peacefulness still felt unfamiliar. I spent that afternoon unpacking books into the built-in shelves beside the fireplace. Small, ordinary tasks grounded me. Folding towels, arranging dishes, opening windows briefly to let cold air inside. No one interrupted me. No one needed dinner. No one asked where something was. I didn't realize how much mental space my family occupied until it suddenly became empty. Around 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed with Sarah's name. I answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart." There was a pause before she spoke. "Dad's losing his mind." I leaned against the kitchen counter quietly. I figured. They genuinely didn't see this coming. A humorless smile touched my mouth. "That's part of the problem." Sarah sighed softly. In the background, I could hear city traffic from Boston and the faint clatter of dishes. "Leo keeps saying you overreacted." That hurt more than I expected. Not because Leo was cruel, but because he truly believed it. Children raised inside certain family dynamics often stop noticing the person carrying the emotional weight of everyone else. To them, the support simply feels automatic, like electricity or running water. Only when it disappears do they realize how much depended on it. "What do you think?" I asked carefully. Sarah was quiet for several seconds. Then she said, "I think you stayed too long." My throat tightened unexpectedly. For years, I had protected my children from the uncomfortable truths inside my marriage. I thought that was what good mothers did, but children notice more than we think. "I'm not trying to destroy the family," I said quietly. "I know." Sarah's voice softened. "Honestly, Mom, I think you're trying to save yourself." After we hung up, I stood by the window for a long time, watching rain move across the lake. Save yourself. The phrase sounded dramatic, almost selfish, yet deep down, I knew she was right. Back in Ohio, chaos spread quickly once practical reality settled in. The buyers wanted possession immediately. The movers had strict schedules. Leo and Chloe suddenly needed temporary housing. And for the first time in years, Thomas had to solve problems without quietly handing them to me. That night he called again. This time I answered. The silence between us lasted nearly 10 seconds. Finally, he spoke. "Where are you?" "Vermont." Another silence. "You actually left?" I did. His breathing sounded uneven. "Eleanor, what is this?" I looked out toward the dark lake. "You already know." "No, I don't." Frustration crept into his voice. People don't just walk away from 23 years because of one dinner. "It wasn't one dinner," he said nothing. I continued calmly. "It was years of becoming invisible in my own life." "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" My voice remained steady. "Tell me honestly, Thomas. When was the last time you asked me if I was happy?" He opened his mouth, then stopped. I could hear him trying to think. That hurt him more than anything I could have said. "Eleanor." His tone softened slightly. "I know we've been distracted lately. Leo moving and work pressure, everything with the promotion. You keep saying lately." I closed my eyes briefly. "Thomas, I've been lonely inside our marriage for years." The words landed heavily between us. Not dramatic, not screamed, just true. On the other end of the line, I heard him sit down heavily somewhere. I didn't know it was that bad. A bitter laugh almost escaped me, but I swallowed it. Of course he didn't know. He benefited from my silence. People rarely examine systems that keep them comfortable. "I'm not calling to fight," I said gently. I'm just done pretending everything was fine. His voice lowered. Are you coming back? I stared at my reflection in the dark window above the sink. The old Eleanor would have hesitated, would have softened immediately, would have rushed to reassure him, but something fundamental inside me had shifted the moment I drove away from that house. No, I said quietly. The silence afterward felt enormous. Finally, Thomas whispered, I don't even recognize you right now. For the first time in years, that didn't hurt my feelings, because maybe the problem was that he never truly saw me clearly to begin with. After we hung up, I wrapped myself in a blanket and stepped outside onto the porch. Cold air brushed against my face while rain tapped softly against the wooden railing. Across the lake, tiny lights glowed warmly through the darkness. Over the next 2 days, Sarah filled the cottage with easy laughter I hadn't realized how desperately I missed. We baked cinnamon bread, watched old movies, and walked through town while snow fell softly around us. For the first time in years, spending time with family didn't feel like work. One night, while we washed dishes together after dinner, Sarah asked quietly, Do you still love Dad? I dried my hands slowly before answering. Yes, I admitted, but not in the same way anymore. She nodded like she already understood. That's okay, she said softly. Sometimes love changes after people hurt each other too long. The maturity in her voice startled me briefly. Then again, children raised inside emotionally complicated homes often grow up faster than they should. On Christmas Eve, Thomas called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me no longer feared hearing his voice. Merry Christmas, he said quietly. Merry Christmas, I replied. There was soft background noise behind him, dishes clinking, television murmuring somewhere far away. You sound peaceful, he said after a moment. I looked across the room where Sarah sat reading beside the fire, with one of Martha's cats asleep in her lap. I think I am, he exhaled softly. The house feels strange without you. I didn't answer immediately, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I no longer felt responsible for comforting every uncomfortable truth. Finally, I said, It probably always did. You just notice it now. Silence stretched gently between us. Then Thomas surprised me. I started therapy. I blinked. You did? Yes. A humorless laugh escaped him. Apparently, emotionally neglecting your wife for years is something professionals have opinions about. Despite myself, I smiled faintly. It's not funny, he added quietly. No, I agreed. It isn't. Another pause. Then he said the words I had waited years to hear, though now they arrived too late to change everything. I'm sorry I stopped seeing you. My throat tightened unexpectedly, not because I needed the apology anymore, but because part of me had once needed it desperately. I know, I said softly. After we hung up, I stood by the window watching snow fall across the lake, while Christmas lights glowed warmly from neighboring cottages. A year earlier, I would have spent that evening exhausted from cooking for everyone else, while silently managing family tensions around a crowded dinner table. Now the cottage smelled like cinnamon and pine. Sarah laughed softly in the next room. The fire crackled gently. Snow covered the world outside in quiet white stillness. And for the first time in a very long time, I understood something clearly. Peace is not the absence of love. It is the absence of disappearing. By early spring, the divorce was finalized quietly. No screaming courtroom battles, no vicious arguments over property, just signatures. The ending of one life, the beginning of another. Leo eventually called one afternoon and apologized awkwardly for how blind he had been. Chloe had moved back to Boston after months of constant fighting between them. Without me buffering every conflict inside the family, all the cracks they ignored became impossible to avoid. I think I became selfish, Leo admitted quietly. You became comfortable, I corrected gently. There's a difference, he cried a little after that. So did I. Not because I regretted leaving, but because sometimes love survives even after the life built around it falls apart. The following October, exactly 1 year after the promotion dinner, I sat on the porch wrapped in a soft cream-colored sweater, with a cup of coffee warming my hands. The lake shimmered gold in the autumn sunlight. Leaves drifted lazily across the yard. Somewhere down the road, Martha laughed loudly at something while gardening. I thought about the woman standing alone in that Ohio kitchen 1 year earlier, staring at leftovers labeled with her own name. She believed leaving would destroy her life. Instead, it returned it. If you're listening to my story right now and recognize pieces of yourself inside it, I hope you remember this. You are allowed to matter too. You are allowed to want peace, to want respect, to stop shrinking so other people can stay comfortable. And no matter how long you've spent disappearing for everyone else, it is never too late to come back to yourself. I'd love to know where you're watching from and whether any part of this story felt familiar to you. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. We have many more heartfelt stories like this coming every single day. So, subscribe and stay with us for the next journey. Until then, take care of yourself too. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.